There is a kind of scar that doesn't bleed. It doesn't show up in X-rays. You can't point to it, circle it, or hand it to a doctor for diagnosis. But it aches just the same, quietly, relentlessly, like a whisper of trauma that never learned to scream. It lives inside the child you were, and it shapes the adult you've become. This isn't fiction, this is the human condition. Because when you grow up in fear, the world stops being a playground and becomes a battlefield. Love becomes a currency. Safety becomes a memory. And you learn to flinch at the sound of footsteps, not because someone is coming, but because someone once did. Carl Jung knew this. He saw it in the eyes of every patient, buried beneath their words, disguised as anger, addiction, anxiety, control. He knew the child doesn't just disappear when you become an adult. It hides. It adapts. It survives by building walls so high you forget there was ever a door. But the scar remains. And here's the tragedy no one talks about. You can build a life that looks nothing like your past, successful, stable, respected, and still be ruled by the ghost of a frightened child. You can wear confidence like armor, make plans, chase goals, hold status, and still be running from the same monster you met in your bedroom when the shouting started, when the silence fell, when the touch came, when the laugh was withdrawn. You survived. But at what cost? Because survival requires sacrifice, and often it demands the death of your authenticity, the burial of your voice, the fragmentation of your soul. So you adapt. You become what Jung called persona, the mask. You smile when you want to scream. You help others while your own heart rots in silence. You become the good child, the overachiever, the people pleaser, the rebel, the perfectionist, whatever it takes to keep the pain at bay. But the pain doesn't leave. It waits. And in the quiet moments when the phone doesn't ring, when the room is empty, when the high fades, you feel it again. That ache, that cold, shapeless ache, it's not just loneliness. It's not just anxiety. It's a signal, a flare shot from the depths of your subconscious, screaming, I'm still here and I still don't feel safe. This is syphoria, that hidden psychological vertigo, the dissonance between the life you've built and the self you've abandoned. You look around and everything seems fine. But inside, your soul is unraveling. You can't name it, but you can't ignore it either. And that's the beginning of awakening. The moment you stop blaming the world and start excavating the roots, the moment you stop treating symptoms and begin healing the wound. Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Think about that. Every failed relationship, every self-sabotaging decision, every time you shrink when you should rise, every time you numb out instead of lean in, it's not fate, it's the unconscious. It's the wound still running the show. But here's the secret. Wounds are not just pain. They're portals. They are the doorway to the truth of who you are. Because the shadow, the rejected, forgotten, buried part of you is where your power lives. Not the fake power of ego, status, or control. The real power. The kind that cannot be taken, only reclaimed. So let's go there. Let's walk back into the room where the fear first began. Not to relive it, but to retrieve what was left behind. Your voice, your worth, your fire. Because healing is not becoming someone new. It's remembering who you were before the fear told you who to be. And it starts with mindset, but not the sanitized Instagram version of mindset. Not good vibes only, or just stay positive. Number. That's another mask. That's more avoidance. Real mindset is war. It's looking your trauma in the eye and saying you will not define me. It's choosing truth over comfort. It's choosing growth over approval. It's choosing to sit with your pain until it tells you what it came to teach. This is the warrior's path. Not loud, not flashy, but relentless. It's the path of belief, not belief in outcomes or other people or external gods. Belief in you, in the part of you that survived, in the part of you that wants to do more than survive. Belief in the truth that your life is not over, not wasted, not broken beyond repair, that every scar you carry is a map, and every time you touch it without flinching, you remember more of who you are. And clarity begins to emerge, not from books or sermons or screens, but from your own bones. You realize you are not crazy, you are not too much, you are not broken. You are awakening, you are remembering, and as clarity burns through the fog, a vision begins to form. Not a fantasy, not a dream, a vision, clear, solid, unshakable, a vision of who you could be if fear no longer ran your life. Not who they said you should be, not who you pretended to be, but who you are when you stop apologizing for existing. And when that vision begins to crystallize, not as something you hope for, but as something you remember, you realize why the pain had to happen, why the fear was there, why you were broken in those exact ways. Because without it, you would have never found this clarity. You would have never had to choose to become. Purpose is born here not in textbooks, not in motivational speeches, but in the wreckage of your false self, in the ruins of your coping mechanisms, in the ashes of who you thought you had to be to survive. Purpose is not a path you find. It's the fire that ignites when you stop running from your past and start facing it with open hands. And that fire demands discipline, not the harsh, self-punishing discipline of shame and self-hatred, but the sacred discipline of love. Love for your potential, love for the child you were, love for the life you still get to live. It's waking up not because you have to grind, but because you refuse to abandon yourself again. It's eating well not to look a certain way, but because you finally believe your body is worth honoring. It's saying no, not out of guilt, but out of power. It's holding the line, protecting the boundary, sharpening the mind, training the soul. Because now you know, discipline is not oppression. It is freedom forged in fire. And from discipline comes action. Real, messy, imperfect action. The kind that changes everything, not overnight, but inevitably. Action that says, I will not wait for the fear to leave. I will not wait for the world to understand. I will move anyway. Because momentum is holy. Because the more you move, the less fear can keep you frozen. Because your nervous system remembers trauma, but it also remembers victory. And each time you act in defiance of your past, you rewrite the story etched into your nervous system. You rewire your fate. You tell your soul, we are not trapped anymore. And then something shifts. Gratitude emerges. But not the shallow gratitude of pretending everything is okay. Not the forced positivity of ignoring your pain. This gratitude is sacred. It is fierce. It is forged in fire. It's gratitude for the worst days, because they gave you the wisdom you now wield like a sword. It's gratitude for the people who hurt you, not because what they did was right, but because they pushed you to awaken. It's gratitude for the silence, for the nights you didn't think you'd make it, for the moments you thought it was over. Because now you see, you were never alone. The child inside you was always there, waiting, hoping, watching, and now finally you've returned to them. And that is where adaptability is born, not from strategy, not from tactics, from wholeness. Because when you are whole, you are not fragile. You are not easily broken. You do not shatter under pressure. You bend. You evolve. You move with the chaos instead of resisting it. And you become dangerous to the systems that thrive on your fear. Because a soul that adapts is a soul that cannot be controlled. A soul that heals is a soul that can no longer be manipulated. And when life throws the storm again, and again you no longer cower. You smile because you've been through worse, because you've been tempered, because you've seen the storm within, and now the one outside is just noise. That is resilience, not hardness, not bitterness, but the quiet, unshakable knowing that you cannot be undone, because you have met yourself, all of yourself, the broken parts, the brilliant parts, the hidden parts, and you have loved them into wholeness. You are no longer afraid of the dark, because you are the light, not the kind that comes from reading more books or memorizing more facts. Number. This learning is cellular. It's embedded in your breath, in your bones, in the scar tissue of your soul. It's the kind of learning that comes only after you've lived through the fire and refused to let it consume you. You learn that fear isn't always loud. Sometimes it disguises itself as logic, as hesitation, as waiting for the right time. But you see it now. You've learned its patterns. You've heard its voice too many times to mistake it for wisdom. You learn that not everyone will come with you, and that's not a tragedy. It's a filtration. Not everyone is ready to meet themselves. Not everyone wants to heal. Some would rather die in the illusion than live in the truth. And you, now that you see clearly, don't chase them anymore. You bless them. You release them. And you walk on. Because you've learned. Nothing external can ever give you what you were missing. Not the love, not the applause, not the validation. That hole you were trying to fill wasn't real. It was a fracture in your perception, shaped by fear, carved by childhood. But you've sewn it shut with truth. You've learned to trust yourself again, to listen to your gut, to honor your emotions, to take up space, to exist without apology. And in this newfound clarity, you become dangerous. Not because you harm, but because you heal. And healing is the most radical act in a world built on wounding. You walk into rooms, and people feel it. They feel the solidity, the groundedness, the absence of need, the presence of something ancient, something real. You're no longer a reactor, you're a creator. You don't ask for permission, you don't wait for validation, you don't beg for love. You embody it. And that is liberation. The fear that once ruled you is still there, but it no longer owns you. It becomes a compass, not a cage. The scars are still visible, but they've turned into sacred markings, proof that you survived, that you rose, that you learned. And in that learning, you've stepped into mastery. Not the mastery of domination, not the hollow victory of control, but the mastery of self. You are not the child you were. You are not the mask you wore. You are not the pain that shaped you. You are the fire that refused to be extinguished. You are the soul that chose to stay. You are the warrior that chose to feel. And that choice, that radical, courageous choice to face your own mind, your own story, your own scars, that is what makes you powerful. Not perfect, not untouched, but whole. Because in a world where everyone is performing, you are present. In a world where everyone is numbing, you are awake. In a world where everyone is echoing, you are embodying. And that presence, that realness, that is what changes the world. Not with noise, not with force, but with truth. And as you walk now, not as a persona, but as a presence. Not as a survivor, but as a sovereign. Not as a wound, but as a wellspring. You become the living example of what healing looks like. Not perfect, not clean, but alive. And that aliveness is contagious. You'll notice the shifts, the energy you attract, the silence you command, the clarity with which you say yes, and the sacred fierceness with which you say no. Because now, the world doesn't get the wounded version of you. It doesn't get the appeaser. It doesn't get the performer. It doesn't get the hollow shell of survival. The world gets the healed one, the real one, the radiant one, the one Jung saw in his dreams, the one Nietzsche glimpsed in madness, the one every mystic has whispered about in sacred texts for centuries, the awakened human, the integrated self, the soul on fire. And now we arrive not at an ending, but at the deepest threshold of all. This is where everything you faced, feared, learned, remembered, and reclaimed coalesces into one moment of clarity so pure it almost feels like silence. But it is not silence, it is stillness. It is the stillness of a soul that no longer runs. And in this stillness, something sacred is born. Power, not the power they sell you in ads, not the power forged in external domination, not the power that makes others fear you. This is the kind of power that terrifies, not because it harms, but because it cannot be touched, because it is rooted in something eternal. It is not fragile, it is not dependent, it is not for sale. It is the power of someone who has faced their own darkness and didn't flinch. Someone who has sat in the center of their chaos and didn't run. Someone who has met every archetype that shaped their life, every ghost, every illusion, every inherited curse, and said, I see you, and I am no longer afraid. This is the power of individuation. The process Jung spoke of not as a luxury, but as a necessity, because without it, you're not living. You're reacting. You're echoing the past. You're performing for the present. You're fearing the future. But once you individuate, once you become whole within yourself, the outside world loses its grip. You're no longer chasing love. You are love. You're no longer seeking safety. You are grounded. You're no longer performing strength. You are unshakable. And from this place, everything changes. You attract differently. You speak differently. You move differently. Not from a place of need, but from a place of knowing. Because now you know who you are. Not because someone told you. Not because a book described it. But because you walked into the inferno of your past, stripped away the lies, and found your soul still intact, burning, brilliant, untamed. And that soul, that is the self Jung spoke of. The integrated whole, the center that cannot be moved, the axis of being. And once you find it, you don't need to seek approval. You don't need to defend your truth. You live it. Every conversation becomes a declaration. Every boundary becomes a prayer. Every silence becomes a cathedral. And this life, this one sacred life, you stop surviving it and you start inhabiting it. Fully, fiercely, freely. So what now? Now, you live as the healed one. Not because the pain is gone, but because you've built something stronger in its place. Now, you lead. Not because you need followers, but because your path lights the way. Now, you serve. Not from obligation, but from overflow. Now, you become the blueprint for others. The living example that it's possible to walk through the inferno of fear and come out whole. You become the myth, the story told in actions, not words. And as you breathe, as you speak, as you love, you radiate a message louder than any voice ever could. I am no longer afraid. And that is the moment the scar no longer defines you. It becomes sacred. It becomes art. It becomes your initiation. You were never just wounded. You were being forged. So now, rise. Not as the broken one, not as the angry one, not as the victim, but as the soul who chose to return home, the one who walked through hell and built a kingdom from the ashes, the one who turned fear into fuel, the one who no longer needs saving because you became your own savior. And you will never forget again. You will never abandon yourself again. You will never apologize for being whole. This is the resurrection. This is the homecoming. This is what happens when you heal the scars no one can see and become someone no one can ignore. And from this day forward, everything you do, every choice, every breath, every word echoes from a center no one else can access but you. Because now you understand the greatest gift of healing is not just peace, it's freedom. Not the freedom they sell in politics or in passports. Not the freedom to do what you want, but the freedom to be, to exist without pretending, to speak without shrinking, to love without losing yourself, to stand alone without feeling abandoned, to be still in your body and not feel like you're at war with it. to look into your own eyes and see someone worth fighting for. This is the kind of freedom that terrifies people who haven't tasted it, because it reveals how trapped they are. And many won't like that. They will call your peace arrogance. They will call your boundaries selfish. They will call your confidence a threat. Let them. That is their mask breaking. That is their archetypes beginning to stir. That is the light you carry shaking something asleep in them. And if they're brave, they'll begin their own return. But if they're not, they'll try to make you small again. Don't let them, because you didn't come this far to dim. You didn't bleed for clarity only to silence your truth again. You didn't excavate your soul just to put the mask back on. You came here to become, to burn, to illuminate, to embody the full spectrum of what it means to be a conscious human, flawed, sacred, shadowed, divine. You came here to break every chain they placed on you. The ones your parents carried, the ones your culture worshipped, the ones your younger self thought were love. You broke them, you shattered them, and now you walk not just healed, but holy. Not just whole, but sovereign. You are not a product of fear anymore. You are not a hostage to your childhood anymore. You are not a slave to the past anymore. You are something else now. Something ancient, something luminous, something terrifying to systems that need you asleep. You are the Miss Reborn. You are the self-made flesh. You are the one Jung wrote about, the one the world forgot, the one buried beneath years of repression and fear. And you've returned, unapologetically. And so the world will see you and try to name you, but there is no name for what you've become. Because you are not here to be categorized. You are here to be remembered as the one who rose, as the one who turned scars into power, as the one who saw the face of fear and refused to bow. That is who you are now. No longer the child trapped in a fearful world. No longer the adult repeating silent patterns. You are the bridge, the fire, the truth. And wherever you walk now, others will feel it. Even if they don't understand it, even if they resist it, even if they never speak it, they will feel it, because energy like yours cannot be hidden anymore. You are the awakening. You are the answer to your younger self's prayer. And everything that tried to break you only made the signal louder. You survived. You learned. You returned. And now you lead in silence, in strength, in wholeness. Let them wonder what changed. Let them feel your presence before you speak. Let them remember you long after you're gone. Because when someone like you walks fully awake, the entire world shifts. So this is where we leave behind the language of pain, the vocabulary of wounds, the dictionary of doubt. This is where the story no longer bends to fear, where the narrative no longer loops through survival, where your identity is no longer stitched together by someone else's silence, shame, or shadow. This is where you return fully to your name, not the one they gave you, the one etched into the marrow of your existence, the one whispered by the soul that chose this life long before your first breath. You are not the pain. You are not the fear. You are not the noise, the numbness, the trauma, the grief. You are the one who endured it, who transmuted it, who rose from it. And that rising, it doesn't need a crown. It doesn't need applause. It doesn't even need to be seen. Because its power is not invisibility. Its power is in undeniability. You are undeniable now. Not because you shout, but because you are no longer silent in the places that used to beg for your voice. Not because you've erased the past, but because you now walk forward with it as your sword, not your shackle. Not because you've become someone new, but because you've become fully you. That's the miracle. That's the revolution. You exactly as you are, exactly where you are, with every scar, every lesson, every step of this inner odyssey are already enough, already worthy, already powerful, already whole. This is your arrival, the place Jung pointed to when he said, Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakens. You've looked inside. You've awakened. And the world is no longer the same. Because a soul that's remembered itself can never again be controlled, can never again be dimmed, can never again be anything less than the truth in motion. So walk now, not back into who you were, but forward into everything you already are. And let the world feel what it's never felt before. A human being who is no longer afraid,